Stry Foundation, and many others also helped, including Friends of Little Bluff and the supporters of Mississippi Valley Conservancy. So while the property is owned by the church and the village, the public is welcome to walk up the stairs, which are right just north of the church, right in the middle of Trempealeau. And you can walk up to the top of the bluff. There's an interpretive sign at the top, and you can enjoy the view and the natural habitat there that is now permanently protected. So I'm joined on this Zoom event by my coworker, Zach Milbrand. Can you wave, Zach? Yeah, you guys saw Zach. He is our stewardship coordinator, and he works with landowners who have or plan to permanently conserve their land by protecting it from development. And after Ernie's presentation, Zach will be available to answer questions related to the property and its conservation values. And now I want to welcome Ernie Bozart. Can you wave, Ernie? There he is. Ernie is a Wisconsin archaeologist whose research has focused on the unglaciated driftless area of western Wisconsin, where he has studied and written extensively about all aspects of the region's archaeological heritage, including, okay, help me here, Paleo-Indian, Hopewell, effigy mounds, Oneota rock art, and most recently, Middle Mississippian settlements. He is currently co-owner of Driftless Pathways, LLC, with his wife, Danielle Brendan. And together they direct the Trempealeau Archaeology Project. So thanks for being here, Ernie. Tell us about Little Bluff.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Zach, for making sure this runs smoothly. So I just want to thank the Mississippi Valley Conservancy for hosting this event and inviting me to participate. And I and Danielle are thrilled that the easement, the conservation easement, has been established for Little Bluff. That project has been a long time in development. The roots of it go back into the 1980s, if not before. So this is it's a wonderful achievement. So what I'm going to do today is offer a PowerPoint program that summarizes what the Mississippian culture is, a little bit about Trempealeau, and then walk you through our research in Trempealeau and focusing on Little Bluff, and then I'll take you on a virtual tour of Little Bluff, the Little Bluff Mounds Trail that Danielle and I helped develop about 3-4 years ago now. So with that, I am going to go to the slide screen and bring up my PowerPoint here and see if this works. There it is, and then
it's working.
Very good. Here we go to from the beginning, and I'm going to just make myself disappear here, I think. Is that right?
It's fine. We're seeing it.
You can see the video. Yeah, I'm going to just, okay, there we go. Okay, so so this is just a shot of Little Bluff and the title, Little Bluff, a Mississippian Temple at Trempealeau. So just to put this, the Mississippian culture in time, this is the timeline of Wisconsin archaeology that begins 13,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age, when we know people first arrived in this region, Native Americans, and they've lived in this state in the Midwest continuously up until the French arrive 350 years ago. And in fact, they still live here today, obviously. But the world changed through time. End of the Ice Age, the ice went away, mammoths and mastodons became extinct, and longhorn bison came in for a while when it was a long, warm, dry period. And then about 2,500 years ago, 5,000 years ago, that drought ended, and the climate became somewhat like it is today, and deer and elk became the predominant food. About 2,500 years ago, people began to build mounds and make pottery for the first time. We call it the woodland tradition. And the Mississippian, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Here we go. The Mississippian culture just occupies a sliver of time about 1,000 years ago. And so that's the period of time we're talking about AD 1050 to 1150 at Trempealeau, a little longer in other parts of the Midwest. So here's Wisconsin 1,000 years ago. The southern portion of the state was the center of the effigy mound culture. These are woodland people who built animal-shaped mounds, birds and bears and deer and long-tailed underworld spirits across the state. There were 3,000, at least 3,000 of these mounds built in southern Wisconsin and just into southeastern Minnesota, northeast Iowa, and northern Illinois. But the center of it is southern Wisconsin, including an effigy mound concentration right near Trempealeau. Effigy mound people were pretty much hunters and gatherers. They did a little bit of gardening, but they at least at the beginning of the effigy mound time period, they congregated along the Mississippi River and lakes in eastern Wisconsin in the warm season, and they had villages and they built mounds. And then in the wintertime, they broke up and went back into the hills and lived in rock shelters and places like that. That all changed when the Mississippians came in 1,000 years ago, but they were pretty much hunters and gatherers. Their houses were wigwams, round pole frame structures covered with bark of various trees or hides. And then these are the first people in this region to have the bow and arrow, which revolutionized hunting and also warfare. So that's the effigy mound culture. That's what's going on in southern Wisconsin 1,000 years ago. And at AD 1050, down by St. Louis, the city of Cahokia developed very rapidly. This is the first city in North America, north of Mexico. Tens of thousands of people came together to live there in a very short period of time. By around 1040 AD, there's maybe 1,000 people there. By 1050 AD, there's probably 10,000 people there, and it grew and grew and grew. And this is the beginning of the Mississippian culture. Mississippians built rectangular flat-topped mounds, platform mounds. And the biggest one is called Monk's Mound. And this is Cahokia State Park in southern Illinois, just across the Mississippi River from St. Louis. You can visit Monk's Mound. You can climb to the top of it. It's 100 feet tall. The base of it covers 15 acres. And it's constructed of something like 25 million basket loads of earth. So that's a lot of people working to build this, the largest mound. There were something like 200 mounds at Cahokia. This is the biggest one. But the reason they had the flat top mounds was to put buildings on top. So this is a stratified society. There's high elite people who are divinity or demigods, religious leaders who live atop places like Monk's Mound and oversee the city and rule the city. Their houses were not round like the woodland people, but rectangular buildings such as this illustration with thatched roofs. These were the Cahokia. The reason you can get so many people was because these are the first intensive farmers growing corn in the upper Midwest. So they grew corn and squash and other crops. And they used stone hoes made out of a special chert called Mill Creek chert, which comes from the mouth of the Ohio River. And when you use a stone hoe to make their gardens and grow their crops, it develops a high polish on the end of it. This is a picture of at the bottom there of a Mill Creek chert hoe with a polished end of it. Cahokia and Mississippian artifacts are very distinctive, very different from the late woodland effigy mound pottery and areas that we find in this region. So their arrowheads tend to be either notched on the sides or sometimes tri-notched with a notch in the bottom. Their pottery is very distinctive. It's tempered with crushed shell or limestone, different from the effigy mound pottery. The earliest pottery at Cahokia is red painted or black painted and polished to a sheen. There is a stratified society. Some people could be their occupation was as artisans. So you get craftspeople making very amazing pieces of art for the first time in this region. This is a statue of a woman, actually a goddess figure, hoeing into it's actually a snake that wraps around her. And then Cahokia is a planned city. It's aligned to the cardinal directions. And there are things called wood henges at Cahokia, where there were a series of poles that were set up to mark the solstices and the equinox. And so these people had a celestial geometry. They were very sophisticated. That all began at 1050 AD while the effigy mound is peaking in southern Wisconsin. We know from archaeological work that around 1100 AD, so about 50 years after Cahokia begins, there's an explosion of Cahokian influence to the north. And we call this the northern hinterland. And you get sites like Aztalan in eastern Wisconsin, which has platform mounds, and you get all these other sites that are marked on this map, and many others. And they're all distinguished because of a kind of pottery, which is called Ramian sized. And it's very distinctive because there's these scroll decorations on it, and it's called the Ramey Horizon. As I'll point out, at Trempealeau, we don't get any Ramian-sized pottery. So the Trempealeau Mississippians are before 1100 AD. So we've known for a long time that there was Mississippians at Trempealeau. We didn't know much about them though. So that some of the first indications were surveys done by mound surveyors like Theodore H. Lewis, who came out of St. Paul, and he, over 10 years in the 1880s, he mapped something like 13,000 mounds across the Midwest, including a series of rectangular platform mounds on Little Bluff. This is his map from 1884, October 1884, of Little Bluff. It's the first detailed map of that area, and what you see on the left side, these are depressions. These are borrow pits where they dug the dirt out to make these three connected platform mounds on Little Bluff. Most of the mounds that Lewis mapped were effigy mounds or round mounds, conical mounds. These are the only platform mounds he mapped in the upper Midwest, other than some at Aztalan. This is another rendition of Lewis's map of Little Bluff, the mounds on Little Bluff, and it's oriented so that north is pretty much to the top here. The other one is tilted to the side. Just to show you how precise and accurate Lewis's maps are, this is a modern LiDAR image of Little Bluff, and you can see the platform mounds, the borrow pits right here, the big platform mound, the second mound, and then the third mound. I'm just going to overlay that map, and you can just see how well that matches up. He was right on with his measurements and his orientation. So Lewis's maps are remarkable records of the past. At the same time that Lewis came to Little Bluff in the 1884, the property was owned by the Squire family. They had owned it from the 1860s, and George Squire was second generation. He lived there till 1924 or 26. And Squire was an amateur archaeologist and geologist by training. And he made maps of Little Bluff as well, but he also took the first photographs. So this is a photograph of Little Bluff taken from across Highway 35, looking back to the southwest. And he's numbered the mounds sort of in silhouette here, with the biggest one, number 1, on the right, and the second one in the middle, and then the third one up on the end. That's Squire's barn in the foreground, which existed until the 1930s or early 1940s. So Squire took the first photographs. This is a photograph that he took up on top of Little Bluff from the largest borrow pit, looking back to the largest mound. And you can see how the rectangular shape of that mound and how flat it is on top. The other thing I want to point out here, these are 1905 photographs, and how barren this property, the hill was. It was originally prairie when the Mississippians got there, and when Squire's there, they pastured it to keep some of the trees down. But this is the first generation growth of trees that's sprouting up on Little Bluff in 1905. Squire also had a garden right by his barn, and he found red painted pottery in it, which he didn't know exactly what it was, but he knew it wasn't from around that area. He speculated it came from the south, and we now know that's true. So those are some of the early indications of Trempealeau Mississippians. We came there, Danielle and I started working at Trempealeau in the early 2000s, but we've been working there every year since 2010. And our research questions over time has been, when were the Mississippians Trempealeau? How long were they there? Did they interact with the effigy mound people? How big was the settlement? Was there a community plan like at Cahokia? And then why did they come to Trempealeau? So those are our basic research questions. And we've been working there for, again, the last 10 years. So here's Trempealeau. Trempealeau is a unique place in the entire Mississippi River Valley. It's right on the Mississippi River, and it's a series of outlier bluffs. So these are 500-foot tall hills that were cut off from the Wisconsin bluff line because the Mississippi River at the end of the Ice Age used to flow on this side, and then at the last glacial burst flood came through, it cut off, so this used to be connected to Minnesota, cut it off here. Then it created the Trempealeau Bluffs here, and then outlier Trempealeau Mountain right there. So these are in the driftless area. And here's a close-up. So here's the outlier bluff, which is Perot State Park, most of it today. Here's Trempealeau Mountain, the only island bluff in the entire Mississippi River Valley. So it's a landmark. It has been for a long time. Historically, people have long, marked the location of Trempealeau Mountain as a special place. This is at the bottom here. This is an 1855 or 1852 painting of the Trempealeau Bluffs, and you can see how barren they were. It's basically prairie at that time. The village of Trempealeau is at the east end of the Trempealeau Bluffs, and Little Bluff is a spur coming off of those bluffs. And Danielle and I, for 10 years, have been working in the village of Trempealeau, working in people's yards and excavating and trying to find out how big that site is and how old it was and what it was all about. So that's where our research is. So this is a Google Earth map showing the areas we've worked. All the red dots are places we found Mississippian artifacts, diagnostic Mississippian artifacts in people's yards. And then the big kind of white squares with red squares with white in the middle are places we've excavated. So this is Squire's Garden, where he found that pottery around 1900. Another site at the other end of Little Bluff. This is Little Bluff. The black squares are mounds. These are the borrow pits up through here. And what we found is that there's two Mississippian settlements in Trempealeau. There's the Little Bluff complex, which is the Little Bluff, the habitation below it. And then we identified just a few years ago another platform earthwork right just east of Little Bluff and below it. And then there's another complex over here where there's two small platform mounds in a habitation area. And what's interesting is that we've shovel tested, we've worked in this area in between, we don't find any Mississippian artifacts. There seems to be a break between these two, a gap between them. They're same time, they overlap in time, but it looks like there's a settlement here and then there's almost a daughter community that splits off and forms here very quickly. So these are some of the things we found in our excavations in various places in Trempealeau. So remember, the earliest pottery at Cahokia in the Mississippian pottery was red painted or black painted, and that's what these are. These are red painted pots from Trempealeau. These are black painted pots from Trempealeau, and none of them have incising, no Ramian size. So this is all 1050 to 1100 AD, these pots, and they're all made in Cahokia. We've had them analyzed. The paste and the tempers, all compared to pots from Cahokia. So they brought their pots up with them from Cahokia. This is a colony of people who brought their pots with them from Cahokia. We also found a special kind of pottery called French fork incised in one specific place. Well, I didn't know what this pottery was. I didn't recognize it at all, but our colleague Tim Pacatot from Illinois recognized this right away. This comes from the lower Mississippi River Valley. These pots were made 1,000 miles from Trempealeau, brought up to Cahokia, and then carried further up the Mississippi River to Trempealeau. The stone tools that we find at Trempealeau, so here's Trempealeau up on top here, this is Cahokia, are made out of cherts or flints that come from Cahokia or to the south. And these are just various names, Burlington chert and St. Genevieve chert. And here's a Mill Creek, here's the Mill Creek chert hoe flake with that polish on. So they had hoes up here, but we haven't found a hoe yet. But when the hoes get dull, they resharpen them, and the flakes look like this. The chips look like this off of them. So all of the stone is coming from Cahokia or to the south, northwestern Tennessee. Dover flint comes from down there. This is the area where that French fork incised pottery is coming from. So there's a lot of southern materials coming from Cahokia up the Mississippi River. Here's Little Bluff in 1938, the first aerial photograph of that area of Little Bluff. And what you see there is this round dot, which is actually a water tower that was constructed in 1938 by the Village of Trempealeau. They got a WPA grant. This is the middle of the Great Depression, to construct a water reservoir, and they put it right on the center, or right on the top of that biggest platform mound, Mississippian mound. It was 30 feet in diameter, went 7 feet down into the mound. There was no archaeology done for it. This is when the road was put in to go up to the top and service the water tower. And then there's a pipeline that came down to a well pumped down through here that pumped the water up, and then gravity feed back down to the village. So they damaged that mound in 1938. We didn't know how extensively, and that was one of our research questions. This, by the way, is Squire's Barn, which is still existing in 1938, but it's now gone. Here is that LiDAR image again, and you can see the borrow pits, but you can also see the depression from that circular water tower, which was torn down in 1991 because the DNR, it was contaminated and the village had to build a new water system. So they tore it down in 1991. So there's damage to this mound. This mound seemed to be pretty intact. There's a water pipeline going through here, but there's the third mound on the tip down through there. So our work, we worked up at Little Bluff in 2010, 2011, and in 2015. In 2010, we focused on the borrow pit areas. We put 21 excavation units in the borrow pits. At Cahokia, when they excavate the borrow pits, they find lots of stuff because borrow pits are convenient places to throw garbage. And when you have a city and you have a whole bunch of garbage, it tended to go into the borrow pits. When we excavated the borrow pits at Little Bluff, we found almost nothing. I think we found one piece of pottery. And that was disappointing at first, but that made us realize that this is not a habitation area. This is a clean area. It's a special area where there's not a lot of garbage, more like a temple, more like a church. We then, in 2011, excavated a T-shaped trench on the north side of the big platform. Now, remember that water tower was right here. So we just went right outside the edge of the foundation, which we could still see, even though it was torn down. And that's what I'm going to focus on to show you that the trench excavations here. So this is looking across the top of the trench, and this is looking up from the bottom, the T of the trench to the top. This is Tim Pocketat from the University of Illinois. So that's our excavations, a 1 meter wide trench or 3 foot wide trench, went down about 3 to 4 feet. And this is what we found on the top. This is that T-shaped trench. The top 1.5 feet on this side was full of concrete and rubble. That's the demolished water tower. Below that, there was a black silt soil, which is the top of the Mississippian platform mound. They capped it with black silt when they abandoned it. Below that, there was a yellow silt, which is the Little Bluff is covered with silt. It's a loess soil, and that comes from the borrow pit. And then below that, there was going all the way down to the bottom of the mound was this red-brown silt, which when you looked at it in cross-section was actually a bunch of blacks and oranges and yellows, splotches that were put together. And here's it looking at it from the top. And those are individual basket loads of earth that were brought up from those borrow pits, those about 100 feet to the north. We calculated that the size of this mound, there was about 400,000 basket loads of earth that were carried from the borrow pits, dug up and brought over to build that mound. A lot of effort. We also, in the top of the mound, found some activities areas, which we call features. This is looking down that trench, and it's at the below the black soil, top of the yellow, and there's a gray area right through here, which is a building, and then there's a red area here, which was a fire hearth. This is the building in cross section. It came down and there was a thin floor down there. There was a hearth in the middle of it. There was no artifacts in this building. And again, that tells us that it's not a residential building. It's a temple. This is a clean structure, like a small church, or the priest lived there and his garbage was taken elsewhere. This is the fire hearth looking at it from the top, and then when we cut it in half again, that fire hearth did not have any ash or charcoal, but it burned intensely enough to turn the yellow soil red. There's some indications of how the Mississippians lived based on ethnographies. When the French came to the lower Mississippi Valley into Louisiana, the Natchez tribe lived there. And the Natchez tribe were still making flat top mounds with rectangular thatched covered roofs. And they were essentially a Mississippian society that continued in historic times. And they were stratified, and their leaders were literally connected to the sun. They were divine people who were gods. And when one of those people died, the tattooed serpent he was called, they burned the temple down. And they had a perpetual fire going on that mound while he was alive. And then when he died, they put the fire out, and that was the end of that world. And then they burned the temple down, and then they built a new layer on top of the mound, and they started another perpetual fire for the life of the next leader. So the world system of the Mississippians, at least according to the Natchez, was that every time the leader died, the world ended. The fire went out, and they built a new one. They started it again. So we think that maybe what's going on here 1,000 years ago at Trempealeau, that here's the building that is tied into the leader, and this is maybe a perpetual fire that was put out, and then this mound, at this time was closed off. We also know from Little Bluff and elsewhere in Trempealeau that the Mississippians did align much of this village, their settlement, to the equinoxes and the solstices. This is Little Bluff. This is Lewis's map showing how the mounds align to the summer solstice, and then there's a ramp going off the end of the mound to the winter solstice, and you can find lines that tie up to the equinoxes as well. East was a hugely important direction for these people. The west in this particular area is blocked by the Trempealeau Bluff. So they're looking at the sunrise going up and down the horizon, and the moonrise. There are lunar cycles that things align to as well at Trempealeau. So they brought their geometry with them as well. So this is the sort of what we know a little bit about, or what we've learned about from Trempealeau from our 10 years working there. The Mississippians came from Cahokia. It's 530 miles up the river against the current. There's two major rapids. There used to be two major rapids at Rock Island at the mouth of the Des Moines River that they would have had to either portage, or were probably coming up in dugout canoes. But they're carrying their pottery with them, their stone with them, their religion with them, their geometry with them, their whole way of life. It's a colony of people coming 530 miles up the Mississippi to Trempealeau. They came here the day Cahokia started, 1050 AD. And they were only here for about 25 years. They're not here until 1100. We find no Ramian size. We've got lots of radiocarbon dates. They all lock into this just a few decades in the second half of the 11th century. There are effigy mound people living around Trempealeau, but there's almost no interaction between the Mississippians and the effigy mound people. It's almost like they just ignored each other. We found one fire hearth at one site below Little Bluff that had Mississippian pottery and effigy mound pottery. That's it after digging for 10 years. The settlement keeps growing every time we go to Trempealeau. It keeps expanding outwards. So it's a large settlement. If you think about how many people it took to build those mounds, it's a fair amount of people in that short period of time. Is there a community plan? Yes, based on the orientation of things, that eastern direction is important. Why did they come to Trempealeau? The Mississippi River, 530 miles. It's basically the same kind of place up and down. You know, you can get fish at Prairie du Chien, you can get fish at Winona, you can go anywhere on the Mississippi River and you can get all the resources you can get at Trempealeau. There's nothing different about Trempealeau than any place else on the Mississippi River except Trempealeau Mountain. And that, we think, was a spiritual place that the people at Cahokia heard about. They heard stories about this magical rock surrounded by water, this bluff surrounded by water that had spiritual power to it, and the leaders of Cahokia craved power, and we think they came up this area this way. It literally to get to Trempealeau Mountain. So that's why we think Trempealeau. Where'd they go? That's a good, that you can ask that at the end if you want. I'm not going to answer that. We don't have the answer. So besides our research, we've done a lot of public outreach as well. So we've had local people involved in our excavations, school groups come out, and we do lots of public talks and things like that. But one of the things we did is we developed the Trempealeau Interpretive Path. So it's a series of 3 places that you can go and visit in Trempealeau and see things about the archaeology. One of these is at Perot State Park at the Nature Center, where we put an exhibit in, talks about the archaeology of the area, all 13,000 years. And it focuses mostly on the park itself. There's another exhibit in the village library, the Shirley Wright Memorial Library, that you can go visit as well. And then the key one in the center is Little Bluff itself, where we developed the hiking trail. So this is the Little Bluff hiking trail. This is a LiDAR image sort of superimposed on the over the Google Earth image. But so right here, this is State Highway 35. The village marked in a series of parking spots that you can park right here. You can park on both sides of the street if you want. This is the Little Bluff Inn, Trempealeau Hotel, Great Walnut Burgers is right there. And so you start at the trailhead and you work your way up along the slope of the hill, and you come up to the top, and then you come over the crest over the mound. So I'm just going to walk you through that. Okay, so here's the kiosk that we built at the bottom of the trail, and on the inside of that kiosk, on the backside from what you see here, there's a series of 3 panels, interpretive panels, that explain a bit about the Mississippians coming up, our work in the area, and then other places in town. So you can see diagnostic artifacts and such. So that's on just an introduction to the Mississippian world and the Little Bluff Trail. Then when you go up the trail, there's a series of stone steps. The bottom quarter of the trail is the steepest part, the first 200 feet or so. And so the steps are put in because it's a pretty steep slope, and then it's a little bit steep for another 100 feet after that. And then it levels off to a nice stroll through the woods on the south slope. It's wooded today. Again, it wasn't wooded back then. It would have been prairie when they built the mounds. So you could see the mounds from the river, and from on top of the mounds, you could see the entire village below you. And then you get to the top, and here's looking up the main part of the trail from the north end where the borrow pits are. So we have an interpretive sign here that talks about building the mounds, Theodore Lewis and George Squire's participation. This is the longest borrow pit. There's a causeway here that was still there when Theodore Lewis mapped these mounds. There's the other circular borrow pit on this side. And so this procession way led to the first mound where the water tower was up through here. This gets overgrown a bit in the summertime. So there's vegetation in here. The best time to see it is spring, April, or fall, October, or in the wintertime in the snow. It's a nice place to take a walk in the snow. You can really see the borrow pits then. Then you come on onto the big mound where the water tower was, and we have another interpretive sign that talks about the water tower construction and our excavations up there and finding the fire hearth and the stratigraphy and such. There's a letter from the Milwaukee Public Museum written in 1938 trying to ask the village not to build a platform mound on top of Little Bluff. They did it anyway. And then you're looking down here to the second mound and then to the third mound down on the tip and the view of the Mississippi River. So we'll just go down there next. Here you're on the second mound, looking out to the river, and this is the third mound right through here on the tip, and this is it in wintertime, same view, and it's a spectacular view down the Mississippi River. There's Lock and Dam 6 there today that obviously wouldn't have been there, but from the tip of Little Bluff, you're looking down basically to the homeland of where these people came from. They're looking down, the river that they came up to get there. Today, there's trees on either side. In fact, when we started working there in 2010, it was completely overgrown. There was a deer trail running down the middle of Little Bluff. And working with the village, they opened up the end to create the scenic view. Obviously, 1,000 years ago, when this was prairie, you could have a 270-degree view across the horizon. And I think there's hopefully some people hope that they might be able to widen that viewscape, but it's a beautiful view. It's an easy hike up there. It takes about 15 minutes to get there, quarter-mile hike up and back. And that's basically a quick shot of Little Bluff. Danielle and I do have a book that talks about the archaeology of Trempealeau and Little Bluff. That if you're at all interested, you can find this book at driftlesspathways.com. And Sarah, I think that's it for my presentation. So I'm going to stop that share, right?
Thank you. That was fantastic, Ernie. And there are a few questions coming in.
Okay.
That was great. I mean, I felt like I was there on the trail with some of those photos near the end. So here are a few questions that are just trickling in now. Do you know how old still on mounds are? And what caused these village citizens to leave? Are the pyramids in Rock Lake connected to the Cahokia?
Okay, so the Aztalan starts off. Aztalan's in southeastern Wisconsin, halfway between Madison and Milwaukee. It's a state park. It's a beautiful place. It's been around a lot longer than the Little Bluff Trail, but so there are platform mounds at Aztalan. Aztalan starts off as a woodland village that Mississippians come to. And the Mississippians come to Aztalan around 1100 AD. So they find Ramian-sized pottery at Aztalan. So it's a little later than Trempealeau. It's a generation or two after Trempealeau. Yeah.
This person also asked what caused those village citizens to leave.
Yeah.
And,
So
go ahead.
We don't know. We don't know why they left Trempealeau. It could one, and there's several possibilities. One is that these, they're coming from Cahokia, they're corn farmers. You're going 530 miles to the north, and maybe your corn crop doesn't succeed up there. It's possible.
Yeah,
we haven't found any corn, which is amazing. If you excavate at Cahokia or if you excavate at Aztalan, you find corn everywhere. So we have found almost no corn. So they're apparently not farming, or at least we're not finding evidence of it. And so what are they eating? And we haven't found a lot of food resources. So it's really kind of a mystery. We know that they're short for a very short period of time. We don't know why they left or where they went. Did they go back to Cahokia? It doesn't look like they went straight to Aztalan, because you don't find the same kinds of artifacts we find at Trempealeau at Aztalan. Aztalan's a second wave of Mississippians coming up.
Are the pyramids in Rock Lake connected to the Cahokia?
No, so the pyramids in Rock Lake are something that they've been analyzed, they've been examined a number of times. They're natural rock features in a glacial lake. They are piles of rock that people have claimed were put there built by people, and it's just not. There's no evidence for it. It's no.
Did you find any Hicksite? Hixton quartzite in Trempealeau?
So that's a great question. So Hixton silicified sandstone, or Hixton quartzite, comes from a place called Silver Mound over in Jackson County. It's about 60 miles from Trempealeau. You can get there by going up the Black River, and it's a pretty distinctive stone. We did not find Hixton silicified sandstone at the Mississippian sites in Trempealeau. We do find other more local sources of silicified sandstone, which aren't as good as Hixton, but it looks like when they came up, they're coming a long way from their home, and they need stone to make tools, and they don't know what the stone's going to be up there until they get there. So it looks like they bring stone with them. They bring this Burlington chert with them, and the other flints, the Mill Creek chert for their hose, and they use that predominantly. After about 10 years, it seems, they begin to find local kinds of rock, and it's not Hixton. They're not going as far as Hixton. They're going maybe 10 miles away. And so at the last sites in Trempealeau, the last occupations, we find some local stone.
Any idea why 3 mounds on Little Bluff?
No, not a clue. I mean, no, don't know.
Any kinds of mounds on Mount Trempealeau itself?
So Mount Trempealeau, it does have mounds. It has mounds that are 2,000 years old, that's with the Hopewell culture. There's a terrace at the south end. There's like 19 Hopewell mounds there, and there's also a bird mound, which is an effigy mound about 1,000 years old on Trempealeau Mountain. There's no Mississippian mounds on Trempealeau Mountain or in Perot State Park. There's been a lot of excavations done in Perot State Park. No Mississippian artifacts in Perot State Park. So just on the west side of the Trempealeau Bluffs, you have effigy mound people, but not Mississippian people. On the east side of the Trempealeau Bluffs, you get Mississippian people, but not effigy mound people. So they're staying separate, and yeah.
Here's someone who says, I found a piece of pottery on the Root River in Minnesota. It has French fork markings on it. Is it possible it could be Cahokia?
It's possible. What I would recommend is that if they can take a picture of it with a scale and email that to me, I can give you my email address. I can look at it. It would be unusual, but not impossible. There are Part of it depends on what the temper that's mixed into the clay is. It's going to tell us a lot about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to, if you please send me a picture, I'd be happy to look at it.
Have the persons who worked on the water reservoir been contacted to learn if they pocketed artifacts from the project?
So the water tower was built in 1938, and the crew, it was a local crew that built it. And there was a study done in the 1980s when they just before they tore that water tower down, and when they had to build a new one. And that archaeologist did interview some of the people who were still alive at the time, 50 years later, who had worked on the water tower. And they claimed they didn't find anything. They claimed they didn't see anything. And there was a dispute that happened in Trempealeau. I won't go into too much detail, but in the 1980s, that there were people disputed the authenticity of the platform mounds. They said they were built in the historic period of time. Clearly not the case. We find Mississippian features and artifacts up there. So, but there was a denial of that, and so none of the people who worked on it claimed to have seen anything.
So we've got a few more, and then I'm looking at the clock, but we've got time for a few more, I think. Someone asks, do effigy mounds contain artifacts or just dirt?
Great question. Effigy mounds do contain artifacts, and most mounds in the woodland period, the Hopewell mounds and the effigy mounds were built as burial mounds. And in effigy mounds, there are burials. Usually one, maybe two people are buried in the heart or the head area of the animal. And with those people, there are sometimes artifacts, and there are usually not many artifacts. There may be a small pot, there may be a clamshell spoon, there may be an arrowhead, but there's not a lot usually in the effigy mounds. The Hopewell mounds, 2,000 years ago, the big dome-shaped mounds, were full of exotic artifacts.
Wow.
And they became famous for that. So there's knives that are 2 feet long, ceremonial knives that were made from flints that come from the Rocky Mountains that are buried in Trempealeau mounds, Hopewell mounds in Trempealeau.
Here's an interesting one. This one might be for you, Zach. Yep. This person says, you mentioned that Little Mound has had its trees cut back a bit to reveal the view. I had the same impulse when I first climbed it. I wished for the 270-degree view. It seems that restoring Little Bluff to its original prairie view would make it an amazing feature in modern Trempealeau. Any chance of that happening?
Yeah, there's actually a really good chance of that happening because there is a special nonprofit, Friends of Little Bluff, and they do a lot of restoration work on the property. Currently, they're negotiating with the Mount Calvary Lutheran Church, which is the owner of the property, to come to a memorandum of understanding to where they can do restoration and invasive species work on the property. And there is a lot of, when I went up there on the face as you're overlooking the Mississippi River, there's still a lot of prairie remnant species there. Like we found big bluestem grass, thimbleweed, and then a couple of kinds of goldenrod up there. So the seeds in the prairie are still there. They just need a little bit of attention and some sunlight.
Got one more question. Ernie, was the main residential settlement at the base of Little Bluff?
So there was a settlement around the base of Little Bluff. There was also a settlement several blocks away, 1/4 mile away, around a couple of other mounds. In terms of size, density of population, there's actually more artifacts found over on the second one than on the first one. So there's probably more people at the second one than around Little Bluff. Little Bluff has bigger mounds, maybe more of an elite residential area, people living on the mounds. So We excavated the mound we found on the Willette property just below Little Bluff that we discovered a few years ago. Our excavations in there came across a large temple that had burned down on top of that mound, and another building as well. And those are, those are like it's like we found a church that had burned down. It was quite amazing, but not a lot of residential artifacts again. So Squire Garden had houses and people living there, but not a huge one.
Well, this has been great, Ernie. Someone asked if we've recorded this, and thanks to Zach, this is being recorded. So it'll be fun to share this with those that couldn't make it today. We'll communicate about how and when we're going to do that. Someone asks if the library is currently open to see the artifacts. I don't know with COVID-19 what the library hours are or how that works.
It would be on their website, though, I'm sure.
Right. Is that the Trempealeau Public Library?
Yeah, surely. Yeah, the Shirley M. Wright Memorial Library in Trempealeau, but it's the only library in Trempealeau. So
great. So I also just wanted to mention that we have monthly hikes and events, and we post those on Mississippi Valley Conservancy's Facebook page and website. Lately, they're virtual events like this, but you can still get out and hike these places on your own. Another place you could visit if you do go to Little Bluff is right nearby is Trempealeau Lakes, which is a public nature preserve that we protect just a few miles outside of Trempealeau. Again, you can find that on our website under nature preserves. And we also have volunteer programs and lots of ways for people to get involved indoors and out. So if you're interested in helping in any way, if you want to get involved, if you're a photographer or you want to do some habitat restoration work, you name it. We need all kinds of help, and we love getting to know people like you and involving you in conservation and land protection here in the Driftless area. So Ernie, thank you again. I still want to call you Bernie.
That's right, Betty.
Let's see. Yeah, Zach just says we will put this on our YouTube page, which is also where we have a video of a fantastic two-part tour video of our Kickapoo Caverns. So he just posted the YouTube link. Wow, he's already got it posted. He's amazing. So we'll share that link out to people as well. And I just want to thank everyone. Lots of comments. Ernie, I can't tell you how many people said, thank you. Please pass along the link. Thank you for making this great presentation.
Thank you all for coming.
So we're going to sign off now, and thanks everyone. We'll hope to see you on the trail.